morning, everyone. My name is Giuseppe Salerno, and I am a psychologist interested in cognitive sciences and phenomenology. I am expert in psychodiagnostic, and I work in Salerno as a psychodiagnostic service manager in a rehabilitative structure for schizophrenic patients. Today I will talk to you about the bodily self and schizophrenia in a phenomenological perspective. Let me start from an epistemological argument. During the 20th century, two ways of considering and studying mind came out from the works of scientists and philosophers. On the one hand, the scientific mainstream adopts a naturalistic point of view on the mind, giving importance to repeatability and reliability of the empirical data. On the other hand, the phenomenologists underline the irreducible importance of subjective experience, arguing that it is not possible to understand the mind without referring to the phenomenological domain and without referring to the world as it appears in our own experience. Both these epistemological standpoints have strengths and weaknesses. The first one, the naturalistic view, have an accurate method, but often miss the aim of studying the mind because of a sacrifice of the subjective experience in favor to the method. The second one, the phenomenological way, analyzes the subjective experience in a first-person perspective, but doesn't have a shareable model of the mind. It would seem that there is no alternative between this dichotomy, but this is not true. In this case, we can change a Latin slogan and say that tertium datur, and the tertium, the alternative way to naturalism and phenomenology, is neurophenomenology. Neurophenomenology is a way to integrate the modern cognitive sciences with Husserlian phenomenology. And it's a way to bridge the gap between bridge the explanatory gap between neurophysiological processes describing third-person perspective and subjective experience describing first-person perspective. Here, in the word neuro stands for neuropsycho-evolutionistic view of human being, as Varela called it. Today, different groups of researchers, implicitly or explicitly, adopt a neurophenomenological starting point, giving importance both to the first and the third-person perspective. Actually, the researchers in particular are converging on the idea of the existence of a minimal self. This argument is about the fact that even if the self is a complex and multi-level notion, there's a basic, immediate, or primitive something that we are willing to call self. And in the ongoing debates on the definition of this notion, researchers are emphasizing the central role of the body, conceived as the constitutive structure of pre-reflective self-consciousness, as proposed by the phenomenological movement, starting from its founder, Edmund Husserl. He developed the distinction between life and corpore, that are the fundamental basis of the pre-reflective self-consciousness and the reflective self-consciousness. This idea is shared by other important phenomenologists as Heidegger, Sartre, and Merleau-Ponty. And the life is the body subject, the lived body experienced from within. My subjective experience of my body embedded into the world. The corpore is the body object, observed from outside. My experience of having a body that is an object between other objects. From a phenomenological perspective, the body itself corresponds to the first one, the lie, the implicit and pre-reflective bodily awareness. In other words, this bodily self is conceived not only as my subjective experience of being engaged with the environment, with the world. So far, from this standpoint, the bodily self is conceived not only as an integrated system characterized by matching sensory motor information, but also as power for action. Today, this concept of bodily self, together with the one of embodiment, is becoming a key paradigm of recent interdisciplinary approaches from the area of psychiatry, psychology, philosophy, and neuroscience. Basing on the distinction between life and corpus, some phenomenologists started to view a large part of psychopathological problems predicated on a disturbance of the embodiment of the body itself, as Professor Gallese started to say before. On the one hand, there are the disturbances of the life, the implicit body awareness, as in the case of schizophrenia and depression. These pathologies are so serious because they involve the nuclear sense of the self, the body itself. On the other hand, there are the disturbances of the corpus, as in the case of hypochondriasis and somatoform disorders. According to this phenomenological approach, the case of schizophrenia is the one that radically involves the body itself. The large part of contemporary scientific literature based on the distinction, based on behaviorist and cognitive theories, attributes the schizophrenia to a disturbance of high-order cognitive processes such as metacognition, theory of mind, and executive function, for example. Indeed, the neurophenomenological explanation of this disturbance of the schizophrenic form of existence insists on the disturbance of the bodily self, the nuclear sense of the self. And this is the reason for the severity of the schizophrenic pathologies. And this is also the reason why the schizophrenic patients are so difficult to rehabilitate. In this sense, the core psychopathological structure of the schizophrenic being in the world is the loss of the vital contact with their own world, in their own body. That is the root where every subjective experience emerges. The lived body is the place where every subjective experience emerges and takes the feature of being mine. There are no other place in the world as my body. It's the 0 point of orientation of my spatial and temporal dimensions. And if my body has some pathological features, as in the case of schizophrenia, all the domains of existence become compromised. My thoughts, my dreams, my feelings, my sensations have something strange. For example, they can appear not as mine. In this case, we can say that the pathology of the bodily self generates problem at the level of anxiety. That is, the implicit awareness that the experiences I'm living are mine. The alteration of the corporeality dimension of anxiety do not allow me to recognize the experiences as mine. In this way of considering schizophrenia, symptoms are less important than this existential background. They are secondary. So far, I've shown the phenomenological approach to schizophrenia, arguing that the core psychopathological structure of this disease is an abnormal body self. But what kind of empirical data do we have supporting this idea? How do we integrate this perspective in an experimental drawing? some researchers did it. First of all, studies using different methods have shown that the recognition of our body is independent from the recognition of other people's body. This evidence suggests that a specific neural network is dedicated to the self-body recognition. And moreover, in the case of the recognition of our body, a group of researchers have demonstrated that implicit body recognition is independent from the explicit one. When submitted to an implicit self-recognition task, a visual matching task, healthy participants show the so-called self-advantage effect, that is a better performance with their own body parts rather than other people's body parts. They better perform processing their body parts. This self-advantage effect can be used to study schizophrenia, the bodily self in schizophrenia. Here, the idea is that the dissociation between implicit and explicit self-body processing is in agreement with the phenomenological theories I have shown before, and also with the neuropsychological studies on brain-damaged patients. Okay. Now, if schizophrenic patients suffered from an impairment of the bodily self, they will show such a difference in comparison to the healthy controls on the implicit task recognition. Implicit task recognition task. In a recent study, a group of researchers studied the self-advantage effect using a group of patients with a diagnosis of first episode schizophrenia and a healthy control group, applying an implicit self-recognition task and an explicit self-other discrimination task. In the right part of the panel, we can see the stimuli. They are inanimate objects or body parts that belong to the subject or not. On the left, we can see the implicit task and the explicit task. In the first implicit task, participants were required to decide which of the two images between the upper or the lower matched to the central stimulus target. In the explicit task, participants were required to judge which image, the upper or the lower, correspond to their own body parts or to their own objects. Okay. First of all, results show that there are no effects in both groups when processing inanimate objects. Indeed, there are differences when processing body effectors. The group of healthy controls show the self-advantage effect. So they are more accurate with their own body parts rather than others' body parts. Schizophrenic patients instead did not show this self-advantage effect in the implicit task. And they also show a higher percentage of self-misattribution errors. These results support the phenomenological idea that the core psychopathological structure in schizophrenia is an impairment of the bodily self, as revealed by the absence of the self-advantage effect. Moreover, the evidence that schizophrenic patients show a clear tendency to misattribute the alien body parts to themselves confirm the disruption of their bodily boundaries. On a clinical point of view, this means that when another person, for example their mother, experiences a sensation or express an emotion, anger for example, schizophrenic patients feel this sensation or emotion as if come from their own body. Okay. Other empirical data supporting the idea of a weaker or pathological sense of bodily self in schizophrenia comes also from the literature on the sense of ownership and agency. The sense of ownership is the sense of being the one who undergoes any subjective experience, no matter if internally or externally generated. A contemporary research field studied the sense of ownership using a paradigm that is called the rubber hand illusion paradigm. The rubber hand illusion consists in watching a rubber hand being stroked together with one's own unseen hand. And if the stroking of the rubber hand and real hand occurs synchronously, the position sense of the real hand shifts toward the position of the rubber hand. Participants report that they feel the rubber hand as a part of their body. A recent study demonstrated that patients with schizophrenia experience a stronger rubber hand illusion than healthy controls. This data suggests that the sense of body ownership as a part of the bodily self is impaired in schizophrenic patients. Another constitutive part of the bodily self is the sense of agency. That is the sense of being the one who generates an action. In this case, the sense of, also in the case of sense of agency, schizophrenic patients have some pathological features. For example, in an experimental work, healthy controls and schizophrenic patients were required to execute simple finger or wrist movements without visual feedback of their hands. During the task, one of three possible images could be presented to the participants. First, their own hand performing the movement. Second, the experimenter's hand performing the same movement. And third, the experimenter's hand performing another movement. The task for participants was to explicitly recognize if the hand belongs to them or not. The results demonstrated that schizophrenic patients were more impaired in discriminating their own hand than healthy controls, and tended to misattribute the alien hand. These columns are schizophrenic patients, and tended to misattribute the alien hand to themselves. Similar self-misattribution errors were found in other works aimed at studying the sense of agency in schizophrenia. This schizophrenic anomalous sense of agency is more closely associated with over-attribution than under-attribution. Okay, now the last point to be addressed is that on a neurophenomenological point of view, the bodily self is the fundamental vehicle of our being intersubjective subjects. As pointed out by Merleau-Ponty in his phenomenology of perception, our intersubjective ability to understand others' mental states come from the intercorporality. Intercorporality means that I live this world as a body, as you live the same world as bodies. And we cannot understand each other because of a pre-reflective perceptual linkage between our bodies, between us. In the case of schizophrenia, the loss of contact with their own body is at the heart of the problem of intersubjectivity. The deep pathological alteration of their body self generates problem at the level of intersubjectivity and generates a sort of attunement crisis that led the social world there social world to become a cold environment. This attunement crisis also results in a loss of self-evidence that is the reason for which schizophrenic patients are so far from the common sense. In conclusion, all these observations suggest that the core psychopathological structure of the schizophrenic form of existence is a disturbance of the bodily self. In this case, the phenomenological analysis and naturalistic models are converging on this same idea about schizophrenia. But the neurophenomenological perspective I've shown has some implication for future developments in the research field on schizophrenia. A first theoretical implication is that the notion of body representation used by the large part of contemporary researchers needs a substitute closer to the lived experience. Neurophenomenologists, as Varela was, for example, are radical embodied theorists and believe in the necessity of a non-representational explanation of human being, of human cognition. In the case of bodily self in particular, the notion of mental representation in bodily format is far from our experience. We do not live a world of representation that mediates our relation with the body, with our body, but instead we live a direct contact with the world through our body. The representational explanation of the human mind could not add anything to the picture we can sketch in neurophysiological terms. It's a matter of level of explanation. According to Dennett, there's a personal level of explanation and a subpersonal one. The personal level is the level of people and their mental state, and the subpersonal level is the level of brain activities, neural systems. The representation concerns the subpersonal level, and then they basically coincide with neural activity. So we must describe the rule of bodily experiences without appealing to the notion of bodily representation. Other two conclusions may be pulled out from my talk, and both pertain the clinical psychological approach to schizophrenia. The first clinical implication is that the abnormal bodily experiences can be used as psychopathological markers of early schizophrenic problems. We already have some psychodiagnostic tools to early recognition of schizophrenia based on the abnormal body experiences, but we must start using them. And we need more accuracy and availability in this field. The early recognition of the schizophrenia is the only way to an effective therapeutic intervention. The last clinical point is more general. For what has been said so far, the psychotherapeutic and rehabilitative approaches to schizophrenia need body-oriented aims and strategies. This means that if we want to defend the idea of a possible care for schizophrenic patients, we must build and apply bodily rehabilitative protocols for these patients. Now it's the time to let the psychotherapeutic currents, bodily currents, to converge in a same psychotherapeutic integrated intervention. Different schools of psychotherapeutic thought have a lot to say about this. The Gestalt current or bioenergetic one, for example, use a method that radically involves the bodily roots of the self. We need an integrated system of psychotherapy driven by a neurophenomenological theory. It's the time to start considering the schizophrenic bodily language as a way to communicate the meanings of a suffering existence. And all of these is in order to soothe the pain and sufferings of schizophrenic human beings. Thanks for your attention.
So there's plenty of time for discussion. Yeah. Yeah, it's better.
Hi, I'm just curious if you can say something about if you think that the effects of schizophrenia on recognition of one's own body and experiences, how that connects up with the other kind of obvious symptom of schizophrenia, which is paranoid delusions or delusional ways of viewing the world. Whether you think those are kind of two separate topics or separate diseases, or whether there's an important link between the two.
Between depression and schizophrenia?
No.